Welcome everyone to Tourism HR Canada's Propel Student Work Placement Program information session. While this event is virtual, we would like to acknowledge that across Canada, we are meeting on lands that have been inhabited by Indigenous peoples from the beginning. Tourism HR Canada acknowledges that our office is on the unceded, unsurrendered territory of the Anishinaabe Algonquin Nation, whose presence here reaches back to time immemorial. Tourism HR Canada recognizes the Algonquins as the customary keepers and defenders of the Ottawa River watershed and its tributaries. We honor their long history of welcoming many nations to this beautiful territory and uphold and uplift the voice and values of our host nation. We invite all attendees to join us in meaningfully and thoughtfully acknowledging the oppression of lands, cultures, and the original peoples in what we now know as Canada, and to consider how we can each move forward in a spirit of reconciliation and collaboration. On today's information session, we have the following in the agenda. We will be leading with some introductions, a little bit about work integrated learning, a little bit about Propel and online portal, and a couple of questions at the end that we can address and open up for more questions. I'd like to introduce myself and my colleagues who will be hosting this session with you today. My name is Rachel George, and I'm a project manager at Tourism HR Canada. With me today is my colleague, Joe Baker, as well as Heather Elder, who will be presenting and moderating the questions at the end. And from here, I will hand over to my colleague, Joe.
Thank you, Rachel. Hello, everybody. It was great to see in the registrations representatives from the post-secondary institutions across Canada, also students who are enrolled in those post-secondary institutions, and some of our employer partners, as well as others from the nonprofit sector. So welcome, everybody. Rachel, I can't advance the slides for the moment unless you give me access, or if you want to advance them for me, that works too. Let's see. Oh, there we go. Okay, so what is work integrated learning? Yes, recognizing that we do have a diverse audience. We know that some of you will be more familiar with what work integrated learning is than others, especially those in the post-secondary sector. But for any of our employers who are new to work integrated learning, this is a definition that's put together by Cooperative Education and Work Integrated Learning Canada. We affectionately refer to them as CWIL, and they're the lead organization across this country for work integrated learning in Canada. So the long and short of work integrated learning is it is a component of a program that involves the academic institution, the student, and an employer in the field of study. And work integrated learning is really designed to help complement the academic program delivery with hands-on learning that takes place traditionally right in the workplace. So work integrated learning for Canada's hospitality and tourism industry has all kinds of different perspectives depending on which field of study the student is in and depending on which employer partner comes to the table to provide that work integrated learning opportunity. There will be a link in the chat to an article on the Tourism HR Canada website that goes more into detail as it relates to definitions of work integrated learning and types of work integrated learning, and also then links to the CWIL website that also gives you access to resources such as how you put together a positive work integrated learning experience for the students who are in your workplace. So lots there for you. Let's move forward. Okay, so types of work integrated learning. CWIL actually defines that there are 9 types of work integrated learning, but what we thought we would do is break it down to the 4 that are probably most relevant to the hospitality and tourism industry. No, this is not the exhaustive list. There are lots, but these are the ones that we see most commonly. Cooperative education, field placement, internships, and work experience. And again, at that link that we've provided, you can get more detail into actually identifying what the nuances and the differences are between each type of work integrated learning. But if you're an employer, these are the ways that the students will be coming to you. And if you're a post-secondary institution, ideally you're recognizing that these are components of your programs, and you will probably have other types of work integrated learning. And if you're a student and you're enrolled in these programs, these will ultimately be the things that show up that trigger you to know that you need to go out and pursue a work integrated learning opportunity to complement your program of study. So with that being said, let's talk a little bit about what the Student Work Placement Program is. The Student Work Placement Program gives post-secondary students across Canada paid work experience related to their field of study. The Student Work Placement Program, or you may sometimes hear it referred to as SWIP, is ultimately funded by our federal government, by the Employment Social Development Skills Canada. So ESDC, Employment and Social Development Canada is funding the Student Work Placement Program. And it's funded specifically by sector. So this program has been around for a number of years, but this is the first time that the hospitality and tourism industry has had a dedicated student work placement program. So that's what we're really here to talk about today. And again, there's another link going in your chat that will take you right to that ESDC website if you want to learn more specifically about the Student Work Placement Program. So Propel is Tourism HR Canada's Student Work Placement Program. And the idea here is we have wage subsidies that are made available to hospitality and tourism industry employers to pay students for work integrated learning experiences in our sector, with the idea, of course, being that those students have an enriching on-the-job work integrated learning experience that is paid through the employer who receives the wage subsidy from Tourism HR Canada. And of course, that we want to launch the career of that student, ideally even within your organization. So think about work integrated learning and think about the Propel program as a great way to develop early talent within your organization. Let's talk a little bit about the high-level calls to action. We will get into more details of how this program works through this webinar, and we will take questions throughout the presentation in the chat, and we will do our level best to answer them at the end of the presentation. But if you are sitting there right now and you are from one of the post-secondary institutions across this country, there are 3 things that we're asking your help. Please help us share Propel information. propelcareers.ca is our website. You'll see it there. We're going to go over the portal a little bit today, and we have access to all kinds of different supporting materials for you. We want you to share the Propel program. Firstly, we want you to share it with your students. There are students in your programs who are trying to find work integrated learning opportunities throughout their year. And this program is in place for the summer semester, for the fall semester, and for the winter semester. But also, we want you to share the Propel information with your direct partners and employers. We know that strong post-secondary institutions are grounded in their local communities. We know that Canada is a very diverse place from a geography and regional perspective. We understand that there is incredible strength between the post-secondary institutions of a city or of a community, as well as the hospitality and tourism businesses. So for our post-secondary institution partners, please share freely the Propel information to your students and to your employer partners. Now, if you are a student attending this information session, or if Information is being passed on to students through post-secondary institutions. There are really only a few things that you need to do, even though we understand that you are the one that gets to go through these great work integrated learning opportunities. This is a digital portal. It requires you to apply for a WIL opportunity, the same way that you would apply for a job. And again, we'll talk a little bit about that portal later on, but it's a place for you to build your profile, look for work integrated learning opportunities, ones that are in your local community, but also assuming safe travel is available. There are great work integrated learning opportunities across this country. And I know that there are some employers who are attending this information session right now that would welcome students from different provinces and different cities. Again, safe travel is always a priority, but we want to make sure that you have the opportunity to take advantage of lots of work integrated learning experiences from across the country. There is a process in this digital portal where you will need to provide proof of enrollment within your program, and that there is a component of work integrated learning as part of that program. We will again circle back around in this presentation and go over those eligibility criteria that have been laid out by ESDC. But work integrated learning needs to be a component of the program that you're enrolled in to be able to access these opportunities and for your employers to be able to access the wage subsidies. And quite frankly, the rest is really up to you. Complete that placement, go all the way through, learn as much as you can on the job, and go on to have great success within your career. That's what we're asking our student partners to do. And if you're an employer, right now, we are going to walk through in a little more detail how you access our portal and how you work through our processes. It is important to say at the beginning, yes, we recognize for everybody involved, employers, academic institutions, and students, there is a certain amount of administration that is required. This is a digital system that has been put together to ensure that we match students with employment opportunities from across the country that meet the criteria of ESDC. And we do need to be very careful as we move people and as we get wage subsidies out there. We are living in a very important space of accountability. So there is a lot of that as you go through the system. That shouldn't deter you from going in and posting opportunities and taking advantage of this program, but I just did want to acknowledge that we do recognize that there's a certain amount of administration that is required, but we know that you already know that it's time well invested. So if you are an employer, please go on to our system, create a profile for your organization, post a work integrated learning opportunity, and we'll give you a little more detail very soon. As you're going through that process, you can apply for a wage subsidy. You don't have to do those two things separately. You can do them all at the same time. And then ultimately, it's your responsibility to hire a student in the same way you would hire anybody for an opportunity. So you're posting an opportunity. It is accessible to post-secondary institutions and students from across the country. You are also applying for that wage subsidy at the same time. And then you make your selection and you hire that student for that paid work integrated learning opportunity. And my colleague Rachel is going to talk a little bit more about that process that also includes how to navigate your way through that wage subsidy application. So this ultimately is the Propel online portal, and we're going to walk you through this. Yes, this component of our presentation is a little bit more focused on our employer partners, but if you're an academic institution or you are a student, this is still worthwhile watching because it's the same system that everybody ultimately has to access. propelcareers.ca is our website. It takes you directly to the portal, and we've also put that right in the chat for you there. And without further ado, I am going to pass it back to my colleague, Rachel.
Thank you very much, Joe. Now, with this online portal, essentially, you can do two things. You can post a work integrated learning opportunity and or apply for a wage subsidy. For employers, the overall process would kind of look like this. You would post the opportunity, then apply for the wage subsidy, and then hire a student if you've not already got one filled in the placement. What I'm going to show you in the next few slides is just a very brief overview of what these look like on the online portal with some images that should help. starting off with posting an opportunity, these are some of the things that you will be asked for. Things like, what type of opportunity are you recruiting for? You can select from the number of options that are there. You can then target a specific field or area of study. You can also target the schools that you would like to show this opportunity to, or you can filter by province or territories. In addition, you would then be asked to talk a little bit about the opportunity you are now posting, whether it be the wages, the length of the placement, the description of the job, etc. And then after that, you can then talk about yourself as an organization and the main contact at this organization who's posting this opportunity. One of the final key steps before you post this opportunity is to then select Tourism HR Canada so that you're posting it under Propel Student Work Placement Program funding when you post the opportunity. Next, we're just going to look at what it looks like to submit an application for wage subsidies. The overall process for an employer when they're submitting a wage subsidy application is to essentially go to the portal, you submit the wage subsidy application. Once we received your application and we process it, we will be in touch with an employer agreement. Once the placement has been completed, you are free to come in and update the application and provide us invoice and supporting documents at the end of the placement so that we can proceed with payment processing. For the actual wage subsidy application, essentially you would select the term that this applies to. Tell us a little bit about yourself as an organization that's employing the student, as well as the placement type. Next, you would also be asked to provide information about the student you have hired. If you've not hired a student at this point, you can skip this step. If you hire a student after you've submitted your wage subsidy application, you can always come back to update your application with the information about the student. You will also be provided an opportunity to upload documents. And this is also a step that you can skip and come back to update your application if you would like to do so later. And now I will hand over back to Joe.
All right, thank you. So as mentioned at the beginning, this is a student work placement program funded by ESTC and our federal government. So they outline the eligibility requirements for all SWIP partners, including Tourism HR Canada. So these are eligibility requirements that are a part of the broader student work placement program, but we do need to follow them. The first one is that this program is eligible only for domestic students, as defined as Canadian permanent residents or citizens. We certainly acknowledge and respect and appreciate the incredible effort for international students to come to Canada and study programs in our field. At this time, unfortunately, those students are not eligible for this program, but it is eligible and available for domestic students. Students need to be registered at a recognized Canadian post-secondary institution in a program that includes a work placement. So once again, these are registered post-secondary institutions, colleges and universities from across the country. And within that program, there needs to be a component of work integrated learning. So keep in mind, as outlined at the beginning, there are many different work integrated learning forms that come within programs across this country. Lots of institutions approach it in different ways that suits their curriculum and their uniqueness. So your program does need to contain some element of work integrated learning. And it is fairly common these days for programs to have them. There are not that many who don't. So that's something that you can validate and check. If you are a student, check with your program faculty or coordinators or administrators. And if you are representing a post-secondary institution, then you will be very familiar with programs that do or don't have work integrated learning components to them. Okay. Advance here. Oh, that moved very quickly. So eligible employers, same thing here. These are eligibility criteria as outlined by ESDC. Tourism and hospitality industry employer or a tourism and hospitality related job function. As mentioned previously, there are many student work placement programs out there in different sectors across the country. This is specifically for the tourism and hospitality industry, which means if you are a tourism and hospitality industry employer, or you are an employer sitting slightly outside the field but have a tourism and hospitality related job function, you are eligible to post jobs, work integrated learning opportunities, and apply for those wage subsidies. These jobs or these work integrated learning opportunities can be either on-site or remote or hybrid. We certainly recognize that we are working and living in a challenging time right now. So there can be adaptability to those work integrated learning roles. There is a little bit of a nuance here. An individual who is receiving a wage subsidy via this program cannot also be receiving another federal grant or program, including some of those that are in the market right now for people who have been affected by the COVID pandemic and the challenges we're experiencing. That doesn't mean that an organization itself can't receive different grants or funding sources, but it does mean if an employer is hiring a student for a work integrated learning experience as part of this program, that same student can't be receiving any other grants or programs through the employer related to other subsidies. So there is some more information on that within the ESDC site, but it is important note. And students must ultimately be hired as an employee of the company, not as an independent contractor. So those are components that are important. Okay, if you have any questions post this information session, the best thing for you to do is to email us at propel@tourismhr.ca, or you can visit our webpage, which is propelcareers.ca. And on the Propel Careers propelcareers.ca webpage, you'll see all of the tools and resources and get all of those other questions answered. But within there, you'll also see the embedded link that takes you ultimately directly to the portal that we went over a little bit today. So with that, I would like to invite my colleague from Tourism HR Canada, get Heather Elder back here, and she's going to help us navigate the Q&A.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much, Joe. And thank you, Rachel. And thanks everyone who's attended today. We really appreciate you coming to learn more about the Propel program. We also appreciate all the questions that have been submitted, and we'll do our best to cover them in the time that we have remaining. But as has been stated, if we miss anything, please don't hesitate to email us at the address on the screen here, propel@tourismhr.ca. And we have also been recording this, and we will send out a link to the recording by email to all the registrants tomorrow. So Joe, the first couple of questions are just a couple points of confirmation. So the first one is just if you could please confirm that this is available in all regions of Canada.
Great question. Yes, absolutely. Across the country, all provinces and territories.
Perfect. And the next one is just if you could please confirm the time frame that the subsidy is available. So this would include the retroactive applications and then our hopes for the summer of 2022.
Yes, thank you. So this is a little bit tricky and a little bit technical. So do try to bear with us here. So because this is the first year that we have received funding to distribute to tourism and hospitality employers. Our funding pool begins June 1st of 2021. So if you had summer placements that started anytime before June 1st, the part that happened before June 1st wouldn't be eligible for that retroactive wage subsidy, but that time post June 1st would be. So June 1st, usually to the end of August, is that summer semester that we talked about. September until about the end of December is that fall placement that we talked about. And then January, usually until about the end of April, is that winter semester. Now, this is a federally funded program that ends on March 31st, which essentially means for the winter semester, we have funding between January and the end of March. And then, as Heather just inferred there, we are optimistic and working very diligently to apply for this program so we can be funded in future years. And should that happen, then the next eligible funding period would essentially be the next summer semester, which would be ideally, fingers crossed, at the beginning of May until the end of August. We do recognize that this is a little bit tricky. If you're in the post-secondary education sector, you live in this world too, you understand how tricky it is to balance all of this. If you're an employer, please don't let that discourage you. It's still worth the time to sit down and put a little bit of energy and effort into this administration process and try to access this wage subsidy. And our team is here to help navigate through that. So hope that was a long explanation, but it is a good, important point of clarification.
Absolutely. Thanks, Joe. Just a quick follow-up on whether or not there's a deadline for applying for the retroactive funding.
Oh, goodness. You know what? I don't even know the answer to that question. Rachel, are you on the line? How's your microphone going? Is there a deadline?
As long as the placement, hello, can you hear me? I hope you can hear me.
Yeah, we got you.
Okay. No, the short answer is there's no real deadline as long as the placement was from June 1st of 2021 and they submit it before February or March next year.
Great. Thanks, Rachel. Okay, so my next set of questions, and I've tried to group them together here for you, Joe, would just be around business types and eligibility. So for example, we have some questions about someone who owns a food truck, someone at a not-for-profit community association, somebody looking for a logistics and marketing coordinator at a performing arts festival. Would those all fall under this program?
Great question. So if you are a registered Canadian business, so for our food truck operator friend there, that if you're a registered business, then yes, you are eligible. If you are a non-profit organization, yes, you are also eligible. And even as it relates to a performing arts studio, if there is a component of hospitality and tourism in your business, which it sounds like there would be, then you are eligible to apply for certain. Whether that one specifically gets approved would be a little bit hard for me to answer without all of those questions or without all of those details. But generally speaking, following the ESDC guidelines, registered businesses, nonprofits, and even in this funding year, post-secondary institutions who are hiring their own students on work integrated learning experiences are also eligible. And some of those measures are put in place because of COVID, recognizing how challenging it is in some cases to find placements. So that again really outlines that. At the beginning, we talked a little bit about the eligibility criteria. There was a link in the presentation and a link put in the chat. If you really want to look at the details, the ESDC website has a lot of details in terms of who's eligible. So does the propelcareers.ca website. And regardless, if you're not sure, either A, check with us first, or B, give it your best shot, go through this process. When you're applying for a wage subsidy, the team at Tourism HR Canada ultimately will be able to adjudicate your application through those ESDC criteria.
Thanks so much, Joe. So the next one is a bit of a spin on the previous questions. It says chef training is generally tourism related, but our placement for a chef student is more related to food security. Would this still be eligible? So sorry, I know that's quite specific.
No, that's great. So yes, food security is an important issue. And if you're hiring a chef training student or somebody who's enrolled in a culinary arts program or a culinary management program, those are exactly the students that are being targeted. So yes, though that sounds like it's something that would be funded. Feel free to send us an email with some more details or go through the process. But that food security is an important issue for the tourism and hospitality related program, and culinary is absolutely one of those subsectors we're targeting. And just so you know, for that application process, remember at the beginning, we were going through the employers where they can select programs that students are currently enrolled in. You can actually very specifically pick culinary arts as a heading so that when your job gets posted, it gets posted and you are looking right at the students who are enrolled in those culinary arts programs.
Thank you, Jill. There are a few questions around student eligibility. So someone has hired 2 new staff members. One of them is an international student doing her post-baccalaureate in tourism. The other is a Canadian citizen who graduated from her studies in business, but would like to gain experience in the tourism field. So would you mind confirming the eligibility around those 2 students, please?
Sure. Unfortunately, neither of those students sound like they're eligible. I'm sorry. The international student wouldn't be eligible under those ESDC criteria because at the present time, it's just domestic students who are eligible. And the one who is graduated already, who's looking for experience in the tourism industry, this funding is not available for recent graduates. This funding is only available for students who are enrolled in those post-secondary programs. So I'm sorry about that.
Thanks for clarifying, Joe. Quick follow-up question would be around age limit on students. So it says similar programs have indicated that students must also be between the ages of 15 and 30 years old. Is there any such, I guess, requirement on this program?
None that I have seen. They have to be enrolled in a post-secondary program at a registered institution. So I suppose if that registered institution has an age criteria to be enrolled, but I have not bumped into any age restrictions whatsoever. And we certainly recognize that today's post-secondary institutions have a very diverse student body. So no, that has not been a problem to this point, or has not been an impediment to anybody who's applied for the wage subsidy.
Thank you. The next question is about, I think, just in terms of when employers will find out whether or not they've been approved for a wage subsidy. So I don't know if that's something maybe Rachel could cover, but Joe, I'll let you step in on this first.
Sure. So as I lightly mentioned, for every wage subsidy application that an employer puts in, the team at Tourism HR Canada adjudicates those applications in the same portal. We just look at it from a different perspective. So we do see when people come in there and create profiles and post opportunities, and then we work our way through those opportunities to approve them or move them forward. But sometimes we also do require a little bit more information. So it's tough to be black and white on that answer, but I know Rachel's probably closer to that process. Rachel, anything to add?
Absolutely. If ideally, we would try to respond within 2 weeks of receiving the application. And as Joe rightly said, sometimes we do need to follow up for more information, so it can take a little bit longer than that.
Thank you, Rachel and Joe. Sorry, I'm just making sure that covered everything in the question. I guess a follow-up is, are we guaranteed, so as an employer, to receive the funds, or do the funds run out at some point?
Can you say that again? Sorry, I'm trying to understand that.
Yes, sorry. So I guess if they are approved for a grant or for a wage subsidy, and they're trying to prepare the placement for the student, and they're trying to determine what their wage would be for that placement. Sorry, I think I'm confusing matters further here. Is there ever a point where the funds might get cut off?
Got you. Okay. So if we have approved your wage subsidy, you will receive a wage subsidy, assuming that you meet all of the key milestones in the process: uploading your payroll documentation, confirming student enrollment. This is federal funding, so of course we follow the accountability practices that everybody would want us to follow. Those are ultimately what guide that process. But if you have been approved for a wage subsidy and you are following along the timelines as outlined in our employer agreements and communicating with the team, we will not arrive at a place where we've run out of funds to allocate to you. That all being said, in the current year that we're in, our funding cycle ends March 31st. So there is a certain amount of due diligence that would be required before that point to get your documentation in, so we can pay invoices. And at the end of the day, I kind of say it as simply as that. At the end of the process, organizations are submitting an invoice to Tourism HR Canada for 75% of the wages paid for the student during that placement that was approved, to a maximum of $7,500. So I hope that answers the question. We will outline milestones, key dates, key deliverables through the process. You will be prompted on a fairly regular basis through the portal and through the communications from our team. As long as you're following along there, anybody who has been approved for the wage subsidy will receive that wage subsidy.
Thanks so much, Joe. The next question is, does there have to be a position available for the student after the subsidy, or can the funding be used for a short-term posting?
Great question. So the funding can be used for a short-term posting. There doesn't have to be anything after. We just hope that there will be, because we are trying to help students launch their careers. So we hope that it is a long-term item, but it doesn't happen in every case. There are some parameters on the length of the placement. We have a minimum of 4 weeks at 20 hours a week. That is outlined on our website. And the reason that we do that is these are work integrated learning opportunities for students. We want to make sure that there's enough time for them in the workplace to actually develop some skills that will be important for them for their careers. And we do acknowledge that takes a certain amount of time. So our shortest placements that we're funding are 4-week placements, but in some cases, placements are funded as long as an entire academic semester, which can be 14, 15, 16 weeks. And in some cases, especially if they're enrolled in co-op programs, those are almost full-time working conditions for that amount of time. So they could be really impactful too.
Great, thanks, Joe. A bit of a follow-up on that would be, what are the types of positions you can hire through the program? So entry level, or would they need to be more supervisory or managerial roles?
So great question. You should be posting positions that are needed within your organization, and you should be posting as many positions as you would like. There is no limit on how many that you can post, and we highly encourage organizations who have the capacity to do so to post many positions. This is for all or any student enrolled in a post-secondary hospitality and tourism or related program. To some of the questions that you asked before, that could be a 1-year certificate at a college, which is maybe a very skills-focused program, although some one-year certificates are a bit more advanced. Could be a 2-year diploma, could be a 3-year diploma, could be a 4-year undergraduate degree, could be a 2-year master's degree. So depending on the level of the position that you're posting, you should be able to match that level with the level of education a student is currently pursuing. So post as many as you possibly can. Do not feel limited. I would imagine that there are some incredible master's degree students, and even in Canada, there are some PhD programs in the tourism space. So there's a huge amount of potential here. So yeah, lots of flexibility there.
Thank you, Joe. I'll just ask a couple more short questions, and then I realize that we're almost at 2 o'clock and we'll need to wrap up. So first one here is there a cost to employers?
So there is no cost to employers to apply for these wage subsidies or to go through this process, other than the cost of the time it takes for somebody on your team or for yourself to sit there and navigate through this process. In terms of the flow of the wage subsidy, as mentioned, employers are expected to pay their students for the work integrated learning experiences and then apply for reimbursement at the end of the process. So I suppose that could be seen at a cost in that you do need to pay for those payroll costs until the end of the process. But otherwise, there is no cost to an employer, which is also especially why we say take advantage of this. Post multiple positions. You may not even necessarily traditionally go after multiple positions, but this wage subsidy is here for you to support you as an industry employer. So go for it.
Great, thanks, Joe. And just one final question for now, and I do apologize to all the great questions that have come in that we just haven't had time to cover, but we will be sure to send out more information when we send out the link to the recording tomorrow. So final one here for you, Joe, is how many terms can one apply for wage subsidies?
Great question. So any given wage subsidy can only be applied to one term. However, if you are looking to hire individuals for more than one term, theoretically, you could hire the same individual as long as they had a component of work integrated learning in their program in multiple terms, or you could hire different people term by term. And, if on that note, if you are an employer and you already have hired a student who's enrolled in a post-secondary program for a paid work integrated learning experience that's already a part of their program and your organization, which many organizations do, especially because many post-secondary institutions across this country have very well-developed employer networks and are constantly advocating for the students to go out on paid work integrated learning experiences. If that has happened already in the past, or it's presently happening, you can still get that wage subsidy application in for that specific person who's in your organization. You don't actually have to go through the process of posting a job and applying for a wage subsidy and getting that person to apply for a job. You could just apply for the wage subsidy and say, I already have this person. They are a full-time student enrolled in this program. It has a component of work integrated learning in it, and I'm paying them for that work integrated learning experience. And as a result of that, I would like to apply for that wage subsidy. There is a lot of flexibility built into this program. Yes, of course, there's a lot of accountability built into this program, but we really are trying to support post-secondary institutions and employers and students who are all committed to the hospitality and tourism industry. So one way or the other, if you are meeting all of the eligibility criteria for ESTC, we will help you find your way through this process to receiving a wage subsidy to pay for a student on a meaningful work integrated learning experience.
Thanks so much, Joe, and thank you also, Rachel. Thanks everyone for all the great questions. Again, please don't hesitate to reach out either online at propelcareers.ca or by email at propel@tourismhr.ca. And we will be sharing this recording tomorrow. And I did see one question come in about whether there would be future sessions like this held. And yes, we will be hosting one in December. So please do keep an eye on our social media channels for links to that registration. And with that, I will hand things back over to Rachel to wrap up. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Heather and Joe, for your help going through the program, as well as answering the questions. Lots of great questions. As Heather has already mentioned, you can find out more information on our Propel webpage, and we are available for you to reach out to us through an email and ask us more information. We'd love to help you out. There is also guides that are on the webpage that you can download to see more information and steps on how to access the portal. Thank you so much for your time and interest in the Propel program and for joining us today. We look forward to connecting with you in the near future and hope you all have a great rest of the week. Thank you so much, everyone.